All right, when last we met, we were continuing to talk about directing, and I was talking about some things that a director has to pursue prior to even the casting and audition process in terms of moving the play from page to stage. And I was talking about, obviously, some research that the director has to do in regards to the play. Previously, I talked about the fact that the playwright's got to research the play itself to determine the genre, to look at the dramatic structure, to determine where the attack point is, where the climax of the play is, how the play resolves itself. I'd also talked about researching the historic time period in which the play takes place, referencing the fact that the world changes, the way people act and react and behave changes. Social morals change. The way people behave changes. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about in terms of the way people behave. I went to see, this is a number of years ago, a production of Romeo and Juliet. And they were doing it in the traditional historic time period of the late 1500s in Verona, Italy. And in Romeo and Juliet, there are a couple of sword fights out on the streets of Verona between the Montagues and the Capulets. And after one of the sword fights, I saw two of the actors giving themselves a high five. I busted out laughing. I thought my wife was going to beat me to death, but it was completely out of context. Nobody was doing that in the 1590s. It was ridiculous. You might think, well, it's a simple little thing, you can overlook it. No. That's not what a director should be doing and allowing or staging. So they have to study the historic time period. The third one I began talking about when we ran out of time was studying the playwright, to learn a little bit about who the playwright is. What you're looking for here is what motivated the playwright to write this play in the first place. Because again, a playwright is writing a play not just to tell you a story, but to tell you that story for a reason. And a lot of times personal things come out, personal things in terms of the playwright comes out through their plays. Most of you are familiar with at least the name of the well-recognized American playwright Tennessee Williams. Wrote Streetcar Named Desire, Desire Under the Elms, The Glass Menagerie. Some of the plays that we consider American classics from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. All of Tennessee Williams' plays take place in the South. Well, look at his nickname, Tennessee. That's not his given name. So that tells you a little bit. Also, all of his plays take place in New Orleans, which is where he spent most of his adult life. Most of his plays take place in New Orleans in the French Quarter, which is where he spent most of his life. Also, when you read 90% of his plays, you will discover that there is always a very domineering female figure in it, usually a mother figure. And I use the word domineering carefully there, or specifically there, in the sense that Tennessee Williams had a very domineering mother. And again, this all begins to explain his plays. Beyond that, all of his plays have a tremendous amount of sexual undertones to them, all kinds of, hot, steamy passion involved in it. But if you look at that hot, steamy passion in there and the relationships in the plays, you begin to see a little peculiar twist to it. And if you research Tennessee Williams a little bit further, you discover that he was homosexual, which then obviously begins to explain the point of view from which he is writing. none of which you would know unless you researched the playwright himself. So the point here is this. And when I asked the question on Monday, hell, today's Wednesday. I'm trying to make today Friday, but it's not. Anyway, where was I going? Most of you say, well, you know, the next thing the director's going to do is casting. Well, how does he know what he's looking for in his cast in terms of the characters that are contained in the play until they have researched the play to know what they're looking for through the audition and casting process? So those are a couple of things in terms of research that the director has to do prior to even beginning the physical production process. Now, there's one other thing a director has to do prior to really beginning to stage the play, and that is the development of what we call the prompt script. The prompt script. They have to build a prompt script. All right, let me explain the word prompting. Prompting is another way of saying helping the actors along. Decades ago, a century ago, when I was talking about Edwin Booth, I was talking about them performing an entire series of plays, a different one every night. And yes, it is hard for an actor to remember their dialogue, their lines, in 10 different plays when they're doing a different one every night. So back in the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, and you still see this to some small degree in amateur theater even to this day, you have what is called a prompter backstage. And this is someone who has a copy of the script and is following along. Nowadays you'll find some blue-haired old lady backstage at the Florence Little Theater with a flashlight and a copy of the script. And what they're there for is in case the actors forget their lines. And when the stage all of a sudden goes quiet and they're going, this prompter backstage will go, and the actor will go, and pick up and carry on and keep on delivering their dialogue. Somebody is prompting them. You won't find that in New York or in regional theater, and you sure won't find it here. Actors are better trained. But nonetheless, it exists. And I will tell you this in terms of prompting. All of you have seen concerts on television. Maybe you've seen them live on stage. A lot of these, especially during the era of arena rock, back in the 80s and the 90s, there were so many musicians out there that were performing stoned out of their minds or drunk as a skunk. And they literally had what was called a teleprompter sitting on the stage floor at their feet, where the lyrics of the music was scrolling by so that they could just sit there and just read it off of that prompter because they were too whacked out to even begin to remember their music. So it does still exist in some cases. And you see it a lot with a lot of the mainstream performers even to this day, especially in the age of digital electronics. But anyway, that's what prompting comes from. In this case, the prompt book or the prompt script becomes, for a lack of a better term, the play's Bible. This is the Rosetta Stone of the entire play. I brought one of mine down from when I directed a play about 20 years ago. And this is from a play written by the American playwright Neil Simon. It's a play called Barefoot in the Park. And I'm going to show you this to kind of give you an idea of the director's process. The dang thing's falling apart because it's so old. But what you see in this book is this. What I have done is I have taken the script that I've ordered from the publisher, and I've fed the thing through a Xerox machine, and I've Xeroxed every page of that script. Then I've cut it out, and I have then mounted it to a piece of just blank, stiff 3-ring binder paper. So what I now have is a copy of the script here. Over on this side, on the back of every page, I have pasted up a little miniature drawing of the floor plan of the set, where the walls are, where the doors are, where the windows are, where the furniture is located. Now again, the director is doing all of this prior to even holding auditions. But what this thing does then, by my having that script in the middle of the page, it leaves me a wide blank border all the way around it. And what I do, and what all directors do, is they begin to envision how they're going to stage the play. And I began to make notes in those margins. And as you flip through this thing, you'll just see all kinds of notes in the margin as to how I plan on envisioning staging the play. Again, I need to kind of have in my head what I'm looking for from the actors playing the characters on stage before I even begin to go through trying to select my actors. All of you have seen, and I'm going to be talking about that term right there, blocking. All of you have seen on television at some point where a football coach is diagramming a play. There's the center, guard, tackle. Let's put the wide receiver right there. Let's put a slot right there. We're going to put the quarterback under the center. We're going to do a power I play. We got the fullback, we got the running back, we got a tight end right here. And what the coach is going to do is say this is how this play is going to run. All right, this guy's going to come and seal right there. This guy's going to come and block this guy right here. This guy's going to come and block this guy here. The fullback's going to come through, and he's going to lead the running back, who is going to come right here. The quarterback's going to meet. He's going to hand it off, and the running back's going to be able to run for a touchdown. All right, we've just diagrammed a power I sweep. This is what we call in theater blocking. Blocking is the directorial term for the director establishing the traffic patterns or the movement patterns of the actors on stage. Blocking is the directorial term for establishing the traffic patterns or the movement patterns of the actors on stage. This stuff is carefully mapped out. An analogy here would be to the game of chess. Anybody that's ever played chess, you know that you are moving each of those pieces strategically toward a goal. The actors don't just get up on stage and rehearse and start wandering around wherever they feel like going, they go. The director doesn't walk into rehearsal and try to make it up on the fly in rehearsal. You know, standing here going, you come through the arch up there, you know, you wander in this door, you wander in that door, you know, blah. No, all of this stuff is mapped out weeks in advance of how the director is going to stage it. And these diagrams, you can't see it because you're too far away from it. But if you look at my little miniature floor plans, you can see where I've penciled in arrows and lines where people are moving, going this way, that way, and the other way. And then I have additional staging notes that I've written in regards to the dialogue over here. And this is a 3-act play, and I've sat down long in advance, and I have detailed, good God, there's a bunch of stuff going on that page. And I've mapped it all out. The stage manager also has one of these. when the director comes into rehearsal and begins staging this stuff, the director's going to change their mind. What they envision sitting in their office or in their living room as they begin to map this stuff out, once they get in here, they're going to might see that something doesn't work. Let me change that. Let me fix it. Instead of the actor taking 4 steps, they take 8 steps to get from point A to point B. And what the stage manager then is doing in his or her prompt script is noting in the similar fashion what becomes the reality of the staging. The stage manager will also, in his or her prompt book or prompt script, will notate all of the show's technology, where sound effects need to be, special effects need to be, where a costume change is, where a lighting change is, where a scene change is. All of that gets noted. And then the stage manager uses their prompt script when they're sitting up there during performance to orchestrate the execution of each and every performance. And that's how all of that plays out. So not only is the director going to do the research, they are going to begin to build their prompt script. All of this in advance of anything to do with the physical production itself. Now finally, page 106, we get to the director working with the performers. And now it is time for the director to hold auditions. And there is a difference between auditions, that process, and what we call the casting process. There is a little bit of a difference. Auditions, what is that? That is the process by which the director views potential actors in terms of what is available for them to be able to use as performers in a show. It's just the process by which they view them. We're going to talk about 3 different kinds of auditioning processes. 3 different kinds of audition processes, if you will. The first type of audition process is what we call a cattle call. Cattle call. What in the world is a cattle call? The show is no longer on television, but it was on for nearly 10 years. There were a few years where I got kind of hooked on it and had to tune in every week. But it was a show called American Idol. Anybody ever see that mess? I watched it to see the really bad people, the people embarrassing themselves. Did you ever do that? Yeah, you were looking at me going, yeah, I remember American Idol. Did you ever watch it just for see how bad people could really be? Yeah, early on. I mean, and they would, but my mama says I sing beautifully. How could you say that to me? Your mama loves you. She's going to say that. She has to say that. But you know what I'm talking about, American Idol. When they would come into a town, and they came into Charleston and Savannah and places, 10,000 people would show up to audition. And they would run them through there just bam, 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 bam. And where the title cattle call comes from, it's like running cattle to slaughter. Like you line them up and you feed them through the meat manufacturing plant. Grind them up and spit them out the other side. A cattle call is just that. It's a mass audition. I remember back in the 80s watching a show like Entertainment Tonight when they were looking for the little boy to play the leading character in Home Alone. I remember that the notice was put out that Paramount or whichever MGM was going to do this new movie called Home Alone. They were looking for an 8-year-old boy, and over 2,000 little boys showed up for the cattle call audition for that thing. I remember them showing the line of kids and their mothers backed out of the movie studio offices, you know, a half a mile down the street, all of them waiting their turn to come in and see if they could win this coveted role. But it's a mass audition. Last week, a number of our theater students went to a conference in Lexington, Kentucky, where at that conference, 850 potential actors were auditioned in 4 days. The way that thing works at that particular conference is, again, over 4 days, 850 potential actors audition for summer theater acting jobs, what we call summer stock. You are given 1 minute to impress somebody. Quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, all audition processes are as close to prostitution as you can get without having sex. I hope you heard what I said. It's the next thing to prostitution without having sex. Now, Mr. Granath, how in the world can you say that? You have 1 minute to sell yourself. And to sell yourself to a producer or to a director to try to get a job. The way a cattle call works is that you have to submit to the production company a copy of your resume. At this thing last week, nearly 100 different theater companies were represented. And they set up the audition process in a very large ballroom in the hotel that's hosting the conference. And from 7 o'clock in the morning until midnight for 4 days, representatives of these theater companies sit out there in the audience and watch potential actors being fed in literally every other minute for 12, 15 hours a day. The potential actor submits a copy of their resume. They are then assigned a number, and then they are told when to show up to audition at 3:33 on Thursday. So by God, they're there for that. They are escorted into this room where there are 100 representatives of different theater companies sitting out there with a copy of their resume, and all of those producers and directors are out there going, okay, impress me. And what you do as an actor is you walk in, you stand up under a spotlight in front of all of these people, and you say, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Granath. I am number 812. And now I have 60 seconds to deliver a prepared monologue from a play that I have memorized. I've added facial gestures, hand gestures, I've, some movement to it, some vocal inflection. I've rehearsed it, performance quality, and I go into it. Blah, 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 blah. And when I'm done, then I walk out of there, and then I hope to hear from somebody out there. Now, the person that escorts you in is holding a stopwatch. If your monologue gets to 60 seconds and you're not finished, that guy's looking at that stopwatch, and when it hits 60 seconds, he goes, click, thank you, next, and literally shoves you out the door, and they drag the next one in. And they do this all day long. And these people that are out there watching are looking for somebody that just reaches out and grabs them, impresses them, and then they'll, by their number and their resume, contact them. But that's what a cattle call is. And you do the same things for musicals. People auditioning for a musical. You got to come in and you sing a song. You do a little dance routine. And you've got a minute to do this. And when your time is up, they'll throw you out. That person that escorts you in as well. If you walk in, I was mocking the other day about Southerners doing Shakespeare, and you come in and go, to be or not to be, that guy's going to go, thank you, next, and they'll cut you off. If you're really bad, they're not going to waste these people's time watching you do something miserably. So it could be a kind of a daunting experience, but that's what a cattle call is all about. The next type of audition process is what we call a cold reading audition. Cold reading. Cold reading audition. We use that here. Community theaters use it. Some degree, regional theater uses this type of audition. Using FMU as an example, here the theater program is not just a laboratory for theater majors, it is also a student activity, which means that any of you people could have showed up for auditions for this thing behind me and you had as good a chance of getting cast as anybody else. The problem with it is this: we can't expect somebody here at FMU who is doing it just for the fun of it to go to the library to find a play, find a script, find a monologue in that play, memorize it, add some action and some facial expression and vocal inflection to it, and come in and give us that kind of audition. So we do what we call cold reading auditions. If you two, for example, were to show up at an audition here, I would hand you a copy of the script and I would hand you the copy of the script. I'd say, you read on page 12 Ralph's lines, on page 12 you read Alice's lines. Get up on stage and read this scene. What the director here is looking for in this situation is some very simple things. Can you speak intelligently? Intelligibly as well? Can we understand what you are saying? Can you project your voice? Now, what does that mean? Project your voice. You folks may not understand me because of my southern accent, but I defy anybody to tell me you can't hear me. Because I've had some actor training and I know how to push my voice so that everybody in here can hear me, including the people that want to sit in a different state. But a lot of people come in and they're a little introverted and they're going to stare at the floor and they're going to talk very softly. You don't have a prayer. So you've got to be able to speak loudly enough to be heard. You've got to be able to speak English correctly. You've got to be able to walk and talk at the same time. And you think, well, how hard is that? Get up on stage in front of somebody. Anybody that's had Speech 101, all of a sudden standing up and talking to some people becomes a real problem all of a sudden. You've been doing it all your life, but when everybody's eyes are on you going, impress me, it becomes a different thing. And then also what the director is looking for is to see how intelligent you are. Whether or not you can figure out what is going on in this scene and convey that through gestures, your facial expression, through your vocal inflection. You see a line like, oh, get out of here. All right? Is that saying, oh, you're putting me on? Or do they mean, get out of here? And if you don't put the right line reading with that based on how quickly you're interpreting what's going on, oh, get out of here. That might be right in one situation, but get out may be appropriate in a different situation. This is what I'm talking about, how quickly you can catch on, how quickly you can interpret what is going on as an actor, and to be able to convey the lines in the appropriate manner. And this is what the director is looking for in what we call a cold reading audition. And it's literally just pairing people up and saying, get on stage and read these lines. Read this scene. And the director sits back and watches and makes decisions based on what they see. The third type is what we call the interview. This is what is used in New York, in Hollywood, and in most major regional theaters. A theater company puts out an advertisement that says that they're looking for actors for a particular play. Actors will see this, call the theater, make an appointment to come in and interview and audition for a panel of judges, if you will. Who are those judges? The producer, the person with the money, the director. If it's a musical, the choreographer will be there, the music director will be there, the vocal instructor will be there. And you literally make an appointment to come in and you audition. Now, the audition is similar to the cattle call. The actor has prepared monologues. They have polished them up, working independently or on their own, to create a quality performance of a monologue. The actor doesn't know whether this play is a comedy or a drama or a tragedy, so they will have quite a few different monologues ready. If they come in and the director says, okay, we're producing a comedy, then you pull out of your little bag of tricks your comedy monologue. You find out it's, Shakespeare, you pull out a Shakespeare monologue and do that for them. If it's a musical, you have a song prepared. You've come with a CD with the accompanying music on it so that you can sing for them. They're going to want to know what kind of dance training you have, so you're going to do a little dance routine that you have polished up for them. And what I'm getting at here is that actor has to come to this audition prepared for whatever the situation is. And they will have 6, 8, 10 monologues that they can just pull out of thin air to provide the people casting the show, conducting the auditions. And of course, then they're going to be interviewed as well in terms of their availability. What have they done in the past? They'll discuss their resume, ergo the title, the interview type audition. But those are the 3 most commonly used audition processes. Now, the second phase of this process is what we call casting. Casting is actually the process where the director sits down and makes their decisions. They've seen all the potential actors, they've held the auditions. Okay, now who's going to best fit in this role, that role, or the other role? In this chapter, there's a statement that the author makes in terms of directing. And what the author says is that casting is 90% of the director's job. I've directed quite a few plays over my lifetime, and I have made some really bad casting decisions where after about a week of rehearsals, I've gone, oh my God, why did I pick this person? I thought they could play this character, and they can't. And it's like throwing out a boat anchor. It brings the whole thing to a halt. Somebody that doesn't have the emotional range, somebody that doesn't have the voice, somebody who moves like Frankenstein, they just something about them just doesn't fit the character. And what I'm getting at by the fact that 90% of directing is casting, if you've got the right actor matched up with the role, things are going to be great. I'll give you an example. Let's take Arnold Schwarzenegger. Let's take Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was 16. Could he play Romeo in Romeo and Juliet? There's no way. And could you imagine somebody casting Schwarzenegger as Romeo in Romeo and Juliet as Romeo? I'll be back. No. Then again, how many of you seen a movie that came out a number of years ago called Radio? Seen Radio? Cuba Gooding Jr.? You need to see it. It's one of the best movies that's been made in the last 20 years. Who's seen Radio? Good many of you. Could you imagine anybody else in Hollywood playing that character other than Cuba Gooding Jr.? Can you imagine anybody else doing it? Absolutely not. That was one of those once-in-a-lifetime casting decisions where they got absolutely the right actor matched up with the right role, and it's magic. That's when it works. Can you imagine Lawrence Fishburne doing it? No, not just no, but no. Wouldn't work. Just wouldn't work. That's my point. Page 106, under the heading of casting. There's a section there that says directors work with the performers. Now we come to the directors work with the performers, along with choosing and developing the script and settling questions on concept, style, and physical production, what the set, costumes, and all are going to look like. The director also casts the play. In theater, casting means fitting performers into roles. The term casting is derived from the phrase casting a mold. Generally speaking, directors attempt to put performers into roles for which their personalities and physical characteristics are best suited. A young actress will play Juliet in Romeo and Juliet. A middle-aged or elderly actor with a deep voice will play King Lear, and so on. When a performer closely resembles in real life the character to be enacted, this is known as typecasting. There are times, however, when a director will deliberately put someone in a role who does not appear to be right for the part. This is frequently done for comic or satiric purposes and is called casting against type. For example, a sinister-looking actor might be called on to play an angelic part. In the modern American theater, performers frequently audition for parts in a play, and the director casts from those performers who audition. In an audition, actors and actresses read scenes from play or perform portions of a script to give the director an indication of how they walk or how they talk and move, and how they would interpret the part. From this, the director determines whether or not the performer is right for a given role. Skipping down a little bit. From our standpoint as members of the audience, it's important to be aware of casting and the difference it can make to the effectiveness of the production. Perhaps an actor or actress is just right for a part he or she has played, what I was just talking about. On the other hand, sometimes the wrong performer is chosen for a part. The voice may not be right. The gestures or facial expressions may be stilted or inappropriate for the character. One way to test the appropriateness of casting is to imagine a different kind of actor or actress in the part while watching a performance. So they're looking to cast a mold, to find that right fit. That mold of that character, let me find an actor who fits that just perfectly. So casting is just simply the decision-making process. Auditions, viewing potential actors, casting, making final decisions. Who's going to play what? All right, so now the director has his script, he's got his prompt script, he's done his research, he's hired a stage manager. We've had auditions, we've done the casting. What's the next step? For those of you who aren't yawning, rehearsal. I want to point out something right here to all of you at this point. The word rehearsal, it sounds like it's H-E-R, rehearsal, but it's spelled rehearsal. You misspell that word on the next exam, I'm going to shoot you. Yes, ma'am, what was your question?
Is it capital
Casting is making the decision as to which character is going to play which part. Auditions is simply the process by which the director views potential actors for their production. One is viewing, one is decision making. Rehearsal. The rehearsal process can be rather lengthy. Can be. Back in the early 80s, I worked for a summer theater company in Florida called the Ring Theater in Miami, Florida, to be exact. We did 4 shows in 8 weeks. We were building a set in 2 weeks. We were rehearsing a play every 2 weeks. We were performing plays for 2 weeks. We did 4 shows in 8 weeks. I didn't sleep for 2 months. The point here is this. I don't care whether you have a week to rehearse a play or a year to rehearse a play. What I'm about to talk about, you will still go through all of the steps that I'm about to talk about in terms of rehearsing a show. And it's actually a 7-step process in terms of rehearsal. A 7-step process. The first step is what we call a read-through. First step is what we call a read-through rehearsal. Typically, there's just one of these. Typically, just one read-through rehearsal. If it's a Broadway-style musical, or if it's Shakespeare, there might be 2 or 3 of them, as opposed to just simply one. But a read-through rehearsal is exactly what it says it is. The actors for a given show, this is the first time that they meet as a company of actors for this play, production of this play. They will meet at the theater. They might sit in a conference room around a conference table. They might sit in a circle in chairs on stage. But it's the first time that they gather together. A number of things take place at this rehearsal. A lot of business stuff, signing W-4 forms and things like that, and signing contracts, all that's got to happen. But the primary focus of this is for the director to begin to familiarize the actors with the play that they're about to produce. If it's a new play, the playwright's still alive, the playwright might come and talk about the play. But nonetheless, the director is going to begin to share his or her concept of the play with the actors. Now, the author of the textbook talks about directors making decisions about the concept of the play quite a bit. Let me explain what we're talking about here. I've used Romeo and Juliet quite often as examples in here because it's obviously a play that everybody's at least heard of. But 10 or 15 years ago here, one of the directors decided that he wanted to direct Romeo and Juliet. I said, okay, fine. Then he said, but I've got a different concept for this. I don't want to do it in the traditional Elizabethan Shakespearean style. I want to do it as if this is one of Mel Gibson's movies, very similar to the Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome style and concept. Now, some of you are looking at me like Mel Gibson, Mad Max. He made 3 of those movies back in the late 70s and early 80s. But those films were about what it would be like on Earth after a nuclear World War III, in terms of what would be left on the planet. It's what we call a post-apocalyptic movie, where the world has become a dog-eat-dog world. So instead of the Montagues and the Capulets fighting with the very thin rapier swords with their hand held up as they sword fight. No, the Montagues and the Capulets are going to fight with a baseball bat with big old spiked nails sticking out of it, lead pipes, pieces of chain, broken glass bottles, and they're going to go at it like that. And I went, whoa, okay. That'll be different. But my point here is this is what the director is communicating to the actors at this point. How they're going to approach the play. How that director sees each of their characters. And he begins to give the actors insight in terms of how he wants those characters played. Now, the term read-through means this. They're going to sit there in that circle around a conference table. Each of the actors now has a copy of the script, and they're going to read the play out loud, with each actor reading the lines of their character. And they're going to read through the play. And the director is going to begin to discuss the exposition, the attack point, the climax, their concept, ideas that the director has regarding that character's portrayal or how he wants that actor to play that character. And it's purely an informative, informational kind of rehearsal. Now I say with Shakespeare or musicals it might be a little different. Well, yeah, it takes a while to get into the rhythm of speaking the iambic pentameter of Shakespeare's metered verse. And the actors are going to need to work through that and get the tempo and the rhythm of just delivering the dialogue ironed out. With a musical, the choreographer's got to come in and talk about the musical dance numbers. The conductor, the musical director's going to have the actors sing through the music with piano accompaniment. So again, they're becoming familiar with the entirety of the script before they ever take stage and begin trying to stage this thing. So this first rehearsal, the read-through, is very important. And that is a good stopping point. I'll pick up there on Friday and finish talking about the rehearsal process.